Okay, let's get into it. For what, more than 60 years, the world basically knew one thing about Nell Harper Lee.
Right.
She gave us To Kill a Mockingbird, this foundational American novel, and then, well, then there was silence.
A very long silence. I mean, we had the controversial arrival of Go Set a Watchman back in 2015, which sort of broke it for a
For a
moment.
moment, yeah. But then she retreated again,
Yeah,
until now.
exactly. 9 years after her death, we're doing a deep dive into something really unexpected, a collection that opens a whole new window, The Land of Sweet Forever.
And it's so important to say up front, this is not a sequel. It's not another finished novel. It's more like a writer's sketchbook, really.
It is. It's a genuine mosaic. It was released on October 21st, 2025, and it's made up of 8 previously unpublished short stories, a lot of them from before Mockingbird.
And those are paired with 8 nonfiction pieces, essays, and things that were published over the years from 1961 all the way up to 2006.
So it's more of a historical archive than, a single artistic statement. It shows her process, her concerns, her humor.
So our mission today really is to figure out if this is just a fascinating historical artifact or if it's maybe a missing piece of the puzzle. We're going in with curiosity, not expecting another masterpiece.
Definitely not.
Okay, so let's start with those unpublished stories. The architect's drafts, you could call them. You can see these ideas bubbling up again and again.
Oh, immediately. The themes are so clear.
Childhood, small town life, the city versus the country, and this deep need for belonging.
And what's really fascinating is how she's working through those themes in her earliest stuff. Most of the stories, they're anchored in a child's point of view.
Right.
A kid wrestling with adult rules they don't understand, with hypocrisy, with just
Right.
misunderstanding. It's the exact mechanism that made Mockingbird so powerful.
So give us an example. How do we see that fierce, independent kid's voice starting to take shape?
Well, look at the story, The Pinking Shears.
Mm.
The main character is named Jean-Louis.
Jean-Louis. So literally scout.
Literally. And this Jean-Louis, she challenges the town's patriarchy by cutting another child's hair. It's a small thing.
Just a little act of rebellion.
A small rebellious act. But she's using that kid's perspective, that refusal to accept these, artificial rules, as a lens for social satire. The child's simplicity exposes how absurd the town's rules really are.
That's such a key distinction. It's not just that she writes about small towns. It's how she uses that innocent perspective as a kind of weapon. And you see how powerful rumor and ignorance are in her worlds, almost as powerful as the law.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Water Tank is the perfect example of this. It's a comedy of manners, really.
Okay.
It's about a 6th grader, Abby, who sees an older boy and girl near a water tank. And she completely misinterprets what's happening.
Because of gossip and just not knowing?
Exactly. And she becomes convinced she's pregnant.
Wow, that's dark, but also kind of funny in a way.
It is, but the comedy turns into satire pretty quick. It's all about how community gossip, the whispers, the judgment, can create so much fear and shame in a child with no basis, in fact.
Right, so reputation and conformity are what really dictate life there, not reality.
Far more than reality. And we see that same tension in other stories, like The Binoculars, where a really bright student clashes with her teacher just for not conforming. The pressure is just suffocating.
But then, of course, Lee leaves Alabama, she moves to New York City, and the collection reflects that.
It does.
Which raises an interesting question. Did leaving the South just mean trading one set of rigid rules for another? The rules of community for the rules of isolation?
That's a great way to put it. It totally shifts the conflict. In the South, the threat is external pressure. In New York, it's internal, it's existential.
You're on your own.
Totally. The city strips away all those social customs that tell you who you are. Take the story, A Room Full of Kibble. It's a comic tragic monologue set in Manhattan, and it's about a friend whose life has just gotten so cluttered and disorganized, and it perfectly mirrors her tiny cluttered apartment. Her ambitions are just everywhere and nowhere.
So you go from this communal struggle of fitting in to this intensely personal struggle of just figuring out who you are when no one is watching.
Exactly. The pressure doesn't go away. It just changes from social judgment to, the fear of personal failure. The city pieces are all about that frantic search for identity.
We have to talk about the title story, The Land of Sweet Forever, because it brings Jean-Louise back home. And the whole plot is about a fight over a church hymn.
Yeah, that one is the most symbolic piece of fiction in the whole collection. Jean-Louise comes home and gets caught up in this debate at her church.
Over a song.
Over a song. Should they replace this old traditional hymn, the one the story is named after, with something newer? and that fight becomes a proxy war.
A test of who belongs.
It's a test of communal belonging, yeah. It shows how something as simple as a hymn can be this powerful symbol of shared identity, of tradition, of ritual.
So in the South, tradition isn't just a thing you do, it's how you prove you're one of them. A fight over a song is really a fight over who controls the community story.
Precisely. It shows how even worship can be a tool for inclusion and for exclusion.
Fascinating. Okay, so that's the fiction, the developmental sketches. Let's pivot to the nonfiction, which covers all those decades after Mockingbird made her famous.
Right.
Lee became so private, famously reclusive. What does this nonfiction voice tell us about the woman who chose to retreat? Is she guarded, or do we get some real insight?
She's surprisingly candid. I mean, you get this witty, insightful side of her that totally undercuts that image of the isolated recluse. The essays give us huge insight into her values.
Where do we see that most clearly?
I think it's in the essay Christmas to Me. It's where she tells the story of her big break, and it was just this act of radical generosity.
Oh.
Some friends of hers pooled their money and gave her a full year off from work. They paid her salary for a year.
Just so she could write.
Just so she could write. And she credited that one act, that community support, with launching her entire career.
That is just a profound story. We always think of artists as these solitary figures, but we forget the community and the generosity it takes. It shows you that the themes in her fiction were real for her.
Absolutely. And she connects that directly to her creative philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
In another essay, Love in Other Words, she argues that love and empathy, they have to be the foundation for any meaningful creative work.
Without that human connection, it's all just empty.
That's what she suggests, yeah. It's like the ethical backbone for her entire career.
And we also get to meet the people who were so important to her, these lovely little personal portraits. There's one about her childhood friend, Truman Capote, the inspiration for Dill, and then a really affectionate piece on working with Gregory Peck.
And those portraits are so key to understanding how she defines success. For her, it wasn't book sales or fame. It was integrity. It was the quality of her relationships. Capote was her creative equal from childhood. Peck was the embodiment of the morality in her work. These people affirmed her values.
Right.
And you see her sense of humor, too, in pieces like Crackling Bread, which is like a funny essay about Southern cooking that's secretly a metaphor for tradition.
Okay, let's turn to the critique. For you, the learner listening to this, we need to answer the big question. Is this a vital read? We know it's not another Mockingbird. So what did the critics have to say?
Well, the verdict is pretty mixed, which makes sense, you know. This was never meant to be a single book.
Right. It's a collection of parts.
Exactly. So critics acknowledge the quality is uneven. Some of the early stories, while charming, they can feel a little slight or dated, maybe a bit too neat in their endings, like you'd find in a 1950s magazine.
So you need to read these with a historian's eye, not a novel reader's heart?
Precisely. Kirkus Reviews said it's agreeable enough, but really best for diehard fans and scholars. They called the pieces pleasant historical artifacts.
Okay, that's a really important distinction. But what's the positive take? Why should we spend time with it?
Because it really does give us that unique, that new window into one of America's literary icons. It shows us her maturation. We see all those core themes, childhood, integrity being stress-tested over decades before they finally came together in Mockingbird.
It's the closest we'll ever get to seeing her notebooks.
Exactly.
The internal assessment score from our sources really nails this balance, I think. If you're a curious learner, this is your guide.
It is. It gives the book 5 stars for historical and biographical value.
5 stars.
Yeah, top marks for the insight into the writer. But then the literary value drops to 3 stars, and the emotional impact is rated at just 2 stars.
And that score tells you everything, doesn't it?
It really does.
You read this to understand how the artist was made, not for a finished, unified experience. It's a tour of the studio, not a visit to the gallery.
Perfectly put. Read it for the context, for curiosity, for the voice, but not for sustained brilliance alone.
So what does this all mean for Harper Lee's legacy? I mean, The Land of Sweet Forever ends up being this incredibly valuable archive. It shows her voice forming, moving from those Alabama schoolyards to Manhattan lunch counters. It gives us context we just never had.
And for anyone who does dive into the book, it's so important to start with the introduction by her biographer, Casey Sepp. That intro is the roadmap you need to place all these different pieces in the right context.
Absolutely necessary. But, you know, the fact is that this came out 9 years after her death. It includes material she chose not to publish, and that raises a really important question for you, the listener, to think about. Should unpublished or early works like this be released posthumously? Or does doing that risk, overshadowing or complicating the author's own carefully chosen body of work? It's a question of legacy and artistic control, and something to mull over as you explore these sketches of an icon.
Subscribe to the Timeless Tales podcast. Your story.